Okay, so as per my whole trying new stuff thing that I've got going on right now, I decided to try yet another different kind of Thursday video. Don't worry, I'm going to get back to more traditional content relatively soon. I do still have those character analyses of the core 6 Avengers planned. That's probably what you're going to end up seeing next week, if not another Q&A to give me more time to put the analysis together. I don't really know for sure yet. I've got a couple of things in the works. But I wanted to talk about this today, and as you can tell from the title, the topic of this episode is going to be why I never finished reviewing the most recent season of Doctor Who, or as I put it in the title, why I stopped reviewing Doctor Who. Because this is also going to kind of reiterate my reasons for not finishing reviewing Capaldi's run on the show either. And I want to preface this by saying that I'm still a Doctor Who fan. I still intend to watch the new episodes when they start to drop again. It's just, I've always been on the casual side of the Doctor Who fandom anyway. And Capaldi's stuff, if you guys recall, it disappointed me pretty consistently. Like, I get what they were going for, especially going back and rewatching a lot of his episodes closer together. I get what they were going for. They were going for a version of the Doctor who cares so much about the net result that he doesn't have time for everybody's bullshit. Like, I get that. I get that that's what the point of his character was, but that doesn't mean that I enjoyed watching him doing that. And he got better towards the end, but by then I was kind of burnt out on his entire character, and Moffat's writing, and Moffat himself, and I didn't have the energy to talk about the episodes. I still watched them, and I still actually enjoyed them. I think Capaldi's run actually ended really well, but I didn't feel like talking about them anymore, and that's something similar to what happened as the end of this most recent season came about. At first, I just didn't really feel like talking about the next episode right away, so I decided to put it off. Then stuff happened, and I had to put it off even more, and more episodes came out. And eventually I just realized it would be better to wait for the holiday episode, which was a New Year's episode, not a Christmas episode this season. When there was some more hype built around the show, I decided I would review the New Year's episode, and then I would review the 4 episodes I didn't get around to reviewing yet that same week. And I already had stuff planned out to say, especially about the proper season finale, because there was one specific aspect of that episode that I just didn't like at all. It had actually kind of pissed me off. But I figured, hey, the New Year's episode is going to fix that. It's going to be a Dalek episode. I still like Jodie's Doctor. I still feel like this character has a lot of potential. And with the storytelling kind of dialing back this season, feeling more like the more grounded 9th Doctor and 10th Doctor stuff, rather than the really over-the-top, outlandish 11th Doctor stuff. Again, I figured that just like back during the episode, Dalek, that getting to see Jodie's Doctor face off with a single Dalek would be a really cool opportunity to get some real insight into her character. And man, was I wrong. The New Year's episode, I don't want to call it trash, but it was trash. I genuinely think it's one of the worst episodes of the new series, and I'm saying that fully aware that Love and Monsters and the one with the Daleks in New York and the one with the Weeping Angels in New York, a lot of bad episodes take place in New York. I recognize that all of those episodes are part of the new series, and they're all trash, too, and I genuinely think this most recent New Year's special is right up there with them, or I should say, down there with them, at the bottom of a dumpster fire. I hated the episode so much that I lost all desire to talk about the show for the foreseeable future. I genuinely at this point have no desire or intention of picking up these reviews when the new season finally picks up. Like, I may change my mind, I reserve that right, but unless something really grabs my attention, I'm not gonna. And that does unfortunately mean I'm not going to talk about the final 4 episodes of the most recent season. I guess I could actually go over my general thoughts about them right now. Let's actually look into doing that. Yeah, here we go. It was Kerblam, the Witchfinders, It Takes You Away, and the Battle of Ranskor Kolos. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right or not. Let's actually start with the Witchfinders. It was fine. Nothing more to say about it. It was fine. It wasn't bad. It wasn't good. It wasn't great, certainly. But it was fine. So was It Takes You Away, though. I had problems with it because I care about the science half of science fiction, whereas a lot of Doctor Who fans just don't. They see Doctor Who as more of a science fantasy type of story. And I guess I do too. It's just, when science gets really stupid, it still bugs me. And this episode was stupid in the way that only a Doctor Who episode could be stupid. The science was garbage. It wasn't particularly compelling lore-wise either, at least I didn't think it was. But it still managed to be kind of creepy and kind of goofy funny and have some good dramatic moments. So at the end of the day, I don't think it was a bad episode. It just wasn't a me episode. Kerblam, though, I really, really liked. It felt like some of the best episodes from 10 and 11's runs. It was just that perfect blend of funny and charming and witty in terms of like the dialogue, but also like genuinely creepy. Like, the only thing I didn't like about it was that the ending felt kind of rushed and pat and unbelievable, but the rest of the episode made up for that in spades. Like, even all of the Doctor's companions had something to do over the course of this episode. It was just, like, I don't want to say it's a perfect episode of the show, but it had all of the right components to be a perfect episode of the show, and I think it nailed most of them. It was actually because I was so excited about this episode and wanted to watch it a couple more times and really review it properly, really dig into it, that I put off that first review and set this whole chain of events in motion. That just leaves the Battle of whatchamacallit and Resolution, I think is what it was called, the New Year's episode. Of course it was called Resolution. Why wouldn't it be called Resolution? It was a New Year's episode. The Battle of whatever connected back to the premiere episode, and it had some really neat, grand landscapes and sets and scenes set in these grand landscapes and sets. And it had some cool lore behind it and neat action. And overall, it was a good episode. Like, structurally, it was a good episode. But one aspect of it really annoyed me. I've brought up multiple times in my reviews of this current Doctor's first season that Jodie Whittaker's Doctor is a hypocrite. And that's not my opinion. That is a literal fact. She has behaved in hypocritical ways all throughout this first season. And that's not me bashing the character. I still really like this version of the Doctor. I like the way she's portrayed. I like the way that she's written, like, moment to moment. I just think her arc could have been written better, because she is, in fact, a hypocrite. She defeated an alien by exploding a bomb inside of his belly. Like, I get that doing so fed it and made it happy, but it was still a violent act. And she uses pressure points to immobilize people, and she refused to let an animal, which was in pain and slowly dying, be put out of its misery just because doing so would have involved using a gun. She wouldn't let her companions defend themselves against, like, genuinely evil things, genuinely irredeemable things, which, if I recall correctly, weren't even alive, because defending themselves against them would have involved them using guns. But then in the same episode, burnt supposedly living things to death, all while proclaiming that she's a pacifist and speaking out for non-violence more adamantly than any Doctor before her, or at least as adamantly as any doctor before her. She is a hypocrite. And all throughout this season, it has felt like they were building up to some big conversation where she is confronted over her hypocrisy, and we get some insight into not just her version of the Doctor, but the Doctor as a character overall. And that moment came in the battle of Who's What's It. And then they just ignored it. They just blew right past it and swept it under the rug. And I was so mad. And it's not like they didn't carry over any themes related to this particular season-long theme into this episode with some of the other characters. So I don't understand why they didn't address it with the Doctor, but they just didn't. They just lampshaded it and moved on. Like, the Doctor is in a situation where she recognizes that she may have to use lethal force against the villain of the week, and she's prepping to do so. And when she's confronted about it, she's just like, well, sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. And they just move on from it. And then the end of the episode ended up being really toothless anyway, so even that scene was effectively completely meaningless by the end. And like, maybe they're still building up to some greater resolution of this arc come next season, but it should have been resolved this season. That's what a season finale is for. At the very least, some stage of the arc should have been resolved, but instead, nothing was. And then I heard the Dalek thing was happening. I'm like, well, okay, so they're planning to address it in that episode, in resolutions. And they didn't. And it was a garbage episode because it wasn't even a Dalek. Like, yeah, it's called a Dalek, and it wears the Dalek tank suit thing by the end, but it's not a Dalek. Like, they try to get around it by explaining this is some unique special breed of Dalek or something, but it doesn't behave at all like a Dalek. There are certain behaviors which are programmed into every single Dalek, and if a Dalek doesn't have those behaviors programmed into them, then they're not a Dalek. And like, I understand like an infiltrator type of Dalek, you'd have to dial them back a bit, but this thing did not act Dalek-like at all. It acted like any other lost, cornered alien that the Doctor has to clash with for a while before talking down at the end and coming to some resolution. Like, this is a Dalek that can ride people and control them, and it's supposed to be really dangerous for the host, and yet it doesn't kill its host. And it had like multiple chances to kill the Doctor when she didn't really have anything to lord over it to prevent it from doing so, and it just didn't. And instead, having conversations with her. It was so freaking dumb. It didn't feel like a Dalek episode. It didn't feel like a variation on a Dalek episode. It felt like somebody had written this episode. I'm not accusing anybody of anything. I'm just telling you what it felt like to me. It felt like somebody had written this episode with an original alien in mind, but then the second half of the season didn't perform as well as they thought, which is a fact. It didn't perform as well as they thought it was going to. And so they just slapped a Dalek-themed coat of paint onto that original alien to hype up the New Year's episode and bring people in. And I'm not saying that that's actually what they did. I'm just saying that it feels enough like that's what they did that it made me mad. I shouldn't watch an episode of Doctor Who and come away mad. Overall, I think this was a solid enough season. It was certainly a solid enough season for new showrunners and a new lead and an entirely new supporting cast. And I do still hold out hope that the show will get better again, but I'm right there with a lot of fans at this point. The new series peaked a while ago, and it hasn't quite managed to ever reach those heights again, and I'm starting to worry that it's never going to. I hope it does. I want it to, and again, I want to reiterate, I'm still a fan of the show. I'm still going to keep watching it. I still don't think that this season was overall bad or anything. It just it disappointed me enough that I don't feel like really analyzing it. And I'm the guy who analyzes the Ronaldo episodes from Steven Universe. If I don't want to analyze an episode of Doctor Who, that should tell you something about just how disappointing it was. And at the end of the day, I kind of feel like maybe I'd be happier if I just went back to being a casual fan who didn't really dig too deep into the episodes. Which is why I don't think I'm going to review them anymore from now on. And that's fine. It's not like I feel like I'm losing anything by making that choice. I actually feel like I'm gaining something back by making that choice. So don't feel like this is a slight against the show. I just don't feel like this is a show that I can both analyze it and enjoy it. But yeah, that's why I stopped reviewing the show. As per usual, though, guys, I'd like to know, what do you think of any of the things I talked about in this video? Do you agree with my opinions on the episodes? Do you agree with my opinions on Jodie Whittaker's Doctor and on the season overall? Do you agree with my choice to stop reviewing it, at least for a while? Now let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over in my Discord, link in the description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.